climate change is affecting our planet, our economies, and our people.
Yeah.
So the European Union is seen as a green, a beacon of green transition with the Fit for 55, which you mentioned, how there is ambitions that we've already created that we need to live up to. And this package is really designed to reduce the EU gas emissions by 55% by 2030. So what tasks do you think are most important in this new parliament in achieving our climate goals? And sometimes there's this juxtaposition of the goals, and it becomes so complex. How do we bring growth to Europe without being a museum, and also achieve our climate goals? Okay, Henrik. Yes, thank you.
Well, I've been in our national parliament for 9 years, and I think it's important to understand that a parliament is not a discussion club. It's a place where you make decisions, and if you don't command a majority, you have to find a majority somewhere. And usually that's done by way of negotiating, and by way of compromising. So what I would like to hear is what types of majorities do you actually imagine, and what compromises are you ready to make? Because no one, not one group in the European Parliament is going to be close to majority. So we are going to have to negotiate, and we are going to have to find compromises, unless you think a parliament is a discussion club. So I'm just really, really curious to hear about the possible majorities, possible compromises, possible agreements. And the things that I'm bringing to the table is that we need to implement the quite ambitious agreements that have already been made, because you also have to avoid placing hardship on specific groups in society. So certain groups are getting unemployed, or certain regions of Europe are facing unemployment. You have to look into the social consequences of the green transition. I know that's important to you, and I think that's one of the important issues, Rasmus, that you usually bring to the debate. But we have to consider the social consequences, because otherwise it will be so divisive that you just can't imagine.
Yeah, and we talk about a just and equitable green transition globally, which is really interesting. And change comes from ideas. So what are the compromises, that we make to actually collaborate across?
Of course, I couldn't agree more. It has to be compromises. But look, Henrik, this is probably number 25 times that we have been debating this, and you have given me handshakes several times that you would not shy away from the ambitious green agenda. On behalf of Danish industry, in behalf of all the businesses in Denmark who actually, have this as a favorite spot and a good spot. But look, what we say, for example, is that we need to also make sure that people here, for example, agriculture, farmers, that they can actually see the way through this transition. They are definitely people who need to see, these are the frames, these are the investment horizons, and this is the way I can transform myself and my business into the new green world. So we have a big promise to the farmers that we will not just take down the
emissions? No.
Nej, det man giver til subsidies. Subsidies. It's 1/3 of the EU budget. The subsidies to the farmers, just not take it away like this. But it has to go gradually in another direction. We'll use all that money to transform. So that's one promise, to make sure that they don't sit on their tractors and go to Brussels all the time. That's waste of time. And energy. And second, because this is where the fairness comes in, we will also say that there has to be a toll. So if we put CO2 taxation kind of stuff on, for example, producing meat, then we should not, of course, have meat coming in from Brazil or New Zealand and just saying, oh, I can have a cheap steak here from... That's, of course, not fair. It's not because we like tolls, but it's because we want to encourage the whole world to change. So if they lower their emissions when they produce meat, of course, they are welcome to also export to our marketplace.
Yes.
That's a very concrete suggestion.
Thank you. Magnus?
Right, so politics is essentially... in my opinion, about arguments, the analytical foundation, and an opinion and ideas, and an exchange of ideas. And obviously, we'll need to do compromises. I mean, We, Social Democratic group in the European Parliament, voted for the climate law, the European climate law. We made one in Denmark in 2019. We voted for the climate law in the European Parliament. That wasn't nearly as ambitious as we wanted it to be, but we voted for it because we're a pragmatic, compromising-seeking party. And I will just tell you what we are running on as a political party. And whether or not I can get all that through Parliament is definitely a tricky and difficult issue. That is political compromising. But I think I owe a responsibility to you guys as voters to tell you honestly what is our political platform. And then you can actually think whether or not I will vote for that party and that person or not. And I think that it is not enough to simply just implement what we already have. We have to actually have higher ambitions. And that does not mean that we shouldn't think about the social balance of it. I mean, I am very much concerned about, for instance, let's take an example. In Germany, there are 800,000 people working in the car industry, which is predominantly fossil fuel based. I understand generally that they are concerned about what the green transition to electrical vehicles means for them, when they can see that the predominant exporter of electrical EVs are China. They have taken over Germany's position at the largest net exporter of cars within the last few years. I understand that they are concerned, and some of them are probably rallying around AFD because of that concern. And that's why I'm saying, as a social democrat, it is important that we talk about, yes, reduction in emissions. Yes, it's predominantly fossil fuels, but we need to talk about jobs and making those jobs come to Europe and Denmark, and not just sourcing them away to the US and China. And that is the balance that we need to keep in the green transition, I think.
Thank you. Rasmus?
Yeah, I remember back in 2015 when I got into the Danish parliament, people were laughing at me when I talked about we need to eat less meat. People were laughing before the election in 2019 when I said we need a climate law with a 70% reduction target. People were laughing when I said before the European election in 2019 we need to make European bonds and make common investments in green transition. All these things are happening now. So that's how also you sometimes create majorities, is actually coming up with the right solutions. And sometimes you have to take the ridicule from other parties for many years, and then you get through with it. And that's what we see, that our role in the parliament right now from the European Green Party is always to be the ones who are coming up with the solution, pushing the others. Because yes, a lot of things has happened, but we still have an agricultural policy based on how much land you own, then you get subsidies, instead of actually having a food policy, which is about producing healthy food that Europeans can actually afford sustainably. And that's a big problem in many of the policies right now in EU, is that it's done in silos instead of actually being thought together. That what right now we are seeing growing numbers of people who are living under the poverty line in Europe. We're seeing energy poverty right now in Europe. And I mean, I think it's a shame to stand here as a European in one of the richer countries and to see, okay, in our club, actually, we have people who live below the poverty line, not just below, but who cannot afford to feed their children 3 times a day. And at the same time, we're spending 30% of our EU budget on an agricultural subsidies, which basically goes to people who own land, instead of it going to producing food. So that's some of the things that we are running on right now, and we're gonna push for after the election, when we have to negotiate the next budget and the next agricultural policy. It's about getting a new headline, so it's a new thing that's in it.
Very nice. So our